Good evening. It is September 14th, 2021 at 7:12 p.m. Welcome to the San Marino Unified School District Board of Education meeting. Here is your board president, Shelley Ryan.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. I'd like to report from the closed session and several action items. First of all, the Board of Education took unanimous action in closed session to approve the settlement agreement for student number 9355. Second, the Board of Education took unanimous action in closed session to approve the settlement agreement for student number 5364. Now I would like to open the regular session. And this is a procedural item. I'd like you to stand and take the Pledge of Allegiance with me, please.
Please place your hand over your heart and let's begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. May I have an approval of the agenda? This is an action item.
I make a motion to approve today's agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Jack. Thank you, Mr. Chang. So I'd like to do roll call for approval of the agenda. Mr. Kalaki?
Aye.
Mr. Chang?
Aye.
Mrs. Chong?
Aye.
Mrs. Jack?
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan? Aye. Student board member?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion has passed. Approval of the agenda. Now approval of minutes. This is an action item for August 24th, Board of Education meeting minutes. May I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Mrs. Jack.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Chung. Roll call vote. Mr. Kalaki?
Aye.
Mr. Chang? Mrs. Chung?
Aye.
Mrs. Jack?
Aye.
Shelley Ryan? Aye. And student board member?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion has passed for Board of Education meeting minutes. Public comments. This is a procedural item. The Board of Education has adopted Board Policy 9323B to ensure the public's right to be heard in any matters pertaining to the San Marino Unified School District. Persons who wish to provide public comment will have three options to submit public comments. Submit through an online form. We did not receive any today as of 3:30. Request to speak during the meeting via Zoom or request to speak during the meeting in person via the public comment card. You may submit an online form. The public was asked to submit public comments for the open or closed session on September 14th from 11 a.m. through 3:30 p.m. The comments received during this time will not be read during the meeting, but will be provided to the Board of Education. There were none submitted. Request to speak during the meeting via Zoom. During public comment, the meeting will pause for 1 minute to take requests to speak. Raise your hand function is used to take requests during the public comment period. For online attendees, press the raise hand icon to add yourself to the queue. For phone attendees, dial *9. The speaking order will be determined based on the order of requests received. Individual speakers will be unmuted and called to speak. Dr. Choi.
Thank you, President Ryan. We are pausing for 1 minute to take requests to speak regarding matters not on the agenda. If you would like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. 30 seconds remaining. If you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. Okay, President Ryan, we have one request.
All right.
Okay. Our first caller is the San Marino Teachers Association. And your line is now open.
Thank you. I simply would like to share some information with the board. I will be addressing other matters as they come up on the agenda, but I would like to, at this point, share sentiments shared by teachers. I would like the board to recognize and acknowledge that our district was one of 21 school districts to open early on last year. The Teachers Association, which encompasses 100% membership of our teachers, worked diligently to make sure transitions would be made, people would be safe, both teacher and student. We were often able to help principals navigate the waters because so much was left undone. Every district in the San Gabriel Valley was able to reward their teachers with monies granted by the state as an acknowledgement of the extra work, the extra efforts, the stresses that were placed on teachers. Our teachers were rewarded with nothing. We were also faced with more layoffs and a board that had members leave and bickering and complaining as new people were appointed. Not one board member has reached out to the association to ask what the progress has been. And that's extremely disappointing. There is so much that is not in place. At this time is a time for us to come together. When the Teachers Association and the teachers have put their best effort forward, we were met with welcoming, but not acknowledged, not recognized for the things that we did. There is so much in need of doing, there is so much out of place, and yet we stand in the wind. You have not yet asked what, how, and when you could be of help. We will be sharing information with you. We will be encouraging. We're very pleased with Dr. Delatorre and her fine efforts, but she is one, and we need to be a force of many. So I really want you to consider how much has not been done for our teachers and how much continues to be placed on their shoulders without compensation, without talk of compensation, without acknowledgement. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, there's requests to speak during the meeting in person via the public comment card. Are there any? There are none at this time. 7A, communication from the audience regarding matters not on the agenda are to be made at this time. This is an informational item. Dr. Choi?
I believe we are moving on to consent matters, right? Public communications regarding matters and consent.
We just did not on the agenda.
So 8?
7B.
So 7B.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Dr. Choi. Communication from the audience regarding matters on the consent agenda are to be made at this time.
Thank you, President Ryan. We are
Thank you, Dr.
pausing
Choi.
for 1 minute to take requests to speak regarding matters in the consent section. If you would like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. We have 30 seconds remaining. If you would like to make a request to speak regarding matters in the consent section, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. We have no requests.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. Next, public hearing of the sufficiency of textbooks and instructional materials for 2021 and 22. This is an informational item. The Board of Education will conduct a public hearing to discuss the sufficiency of textbooks and instructional materials for this school year. Dr. Lena Richter.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the board, student board member, and executive team. The Board of Education is requested to convene a public hearing to adopt a resolution on the sufficiency of textbooks and instructional materials for student use during the 2021-22 school year. Tonight's meeting serves as the public hearing for consideration of adoption for Resolution 8, sufficiency of textbooks.
Are there any questions? No? Oh, so it's just
So-
informational?
Yes. Opening the-
May I go and begin the clock for the 1 minute
Oh,
to take
okay.
requests from Zoom?
Oh,
for this
okay,
hearing?
thank you.
Okay, we are pausing for a minute again to take requests to speak regarding the public hearing of sufficiency of textbooks and instructional materials. If you would like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. Thirty seconds remaining. If you would like to make a request to speak regarding the public hearing of sufficiency of textbooks and instructional materials, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. Okay, we have no requests.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. Next, we have the consent section of the agenda. This is 9A to 9E. May I have a motion?
First, before we approve this agenda, I have a question
Mhm.
to the superintendent. So if we look for the purchase order log, the page 3, so there is a vendor, we post 3 million in. So I like to know if that there is a good payment, so is that only pay for the service or we are going to pay for right now?
So the purchase order list simply indicates that a purchase order has been issued. It is not the warrant listing, which would show that the vendor has been paid.
Mhm.
So that's just a purchase order.
Okay, so as the side visit I mentioned about some of the tree,
Yes.
So I like, walk through the whole school side and then make sure which one
Mhm.
is a priority. As a son, they already have, not the family, they already hit the roof. So I would like to quickly to resolve those issues.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chang. As we were conducting the site visit, I did photograph those trees that were growing over the top of the building and in some cases just touching the building. And we are going to meet with Mr. Cardenas within the next week to show him those photographs and also to ensure that that will be taken care of right away.
Thank you. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent section from the 9A to the 9E.
Thank you, Mr. Chang.
I would second that, but I do have questions.
Okay,
Would that
go
come
ahead.
after the second? So I second that motion. So my question is regarding the extra duty assignments. I noticed a number of them in curriculum support, after school academic intervention counseling homework club, which I was thrilled to see. I was just wondering how the students were going to be identified and accessing these services.
I'm going to defer to Dr. Richter to respond to that question.
Sure, I can respond now, or if you'd like, it's included in my presentation, which will be.
We can get to it
Okay.
later than in the
Yeah.
presentation.
Okay.
And then my other question was regarding the Apex services line item. What does that include in terms of what is included in that payment in terms of services or curriculum or materials?
The payment for Apex includes the courses that are offered through Apex.
And then what does that include? Is that curriculum and materials or does that
Curriculum,
include
all the
instructor
curriculum and courses
and not
and
necessarily-
content,
So not instructor.
correct.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
All right, with that, Mr. Chang motioned and Mrs. Chong second. If there are no further discussion, I'd like to do roll call. Mrs. Jack,
Aye.
Mrs. Chong,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mr. Kalaki,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye, and student board member.
Aye.
Motion is passed. Next, we have the communication section. This is a procedural item. And let's begin with communication from the Board of Education. Mrs. Jack, would you like to lead us off?
I don't have anything to report.
Okay, Mrs. Chong?
I'm trying to think. It's been a long couple of weeks. Nothing to report at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chang?
Last Friday, I went to see the football game. Over some time. So I think it's good, yeah, and go back to the football field to see the player play again with the outside team. And then yesterday, I have a side visit with the superintendent, Dr. Directory, and the board member, Mr. Chong. So we visited the middle school and the high school. I think it's good to make a run and see what's going on, the each classroom. Yeah. And then the last Thursday, I also attended the 911 practice. This provided by Child Ceremony. We always appreciate the police and the fire department staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. Mr. Kalaki?
The last couple of weeks, I've met with Dr. Directory a couple of times. We talked about a variety of issues, and it's been very helpful in conveying information that's been relayed to me by people in the community, as well as getting answers to various issues. So I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you regularly. In addition, I did attend, although I attended a very specific part of the HMS online back to school night, as well as the Seminary High School back to school night, which was online. I did receive subsequently a number of thank yous from people in our community that really appreciate the opportunity to have an online back to school night because they wanted to attend, and it separated out a concern of potentially going in person, but still being able to understand what's going to happen in each of their students' classrooms throughout the year. So there was a lot of thank yous that I was asked to actually convey principles, and I appreciate that. Also, I completed the Masters in Governance program with the CSBA, and actually had a couple of sessions with some other board members as well that were doing that program. So it was very informational, very helpful on a lot of subjects. So I did notice that somebody in the audience is I assume from CSBA, or at least I'm sure. But I just wanted to say thank you to that. Definitely a quality program. I did have a lot of discussions with various independent study parents. They expressed some concerns, which I have expressed over to Dr. Gaylor, and working to try to provide nice quality education to that portion of our student community at the same level as any other student in our community. So that's really filled up most of the last.
Thank you. I'm going to leave it to Dr. Delatorre to report back on some of the coffees that we've been having. And Dr. Delatorre and I had invited the community to join us in discussion and coffee. So I'm going to leave that to you. And I concur with Mr. Chang that it's nice to be back under the Friday night lights and seeing our children engage in athletic activities and still maintaining safety protocols. And so thank you for that. So the superintendent next, communication.
Thank you, President Ryan. I am delighted this evening to really recognize the executive team who has been working just tirelessly to ensure that we are meeting all of the requirements for compliance with COVID-19. In addition to that, independent study, which is currently our only option for educating students outside of the in-person education experience. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank both Dr. Choi and Dr. Richter for their professionalism and their stick-to-itiveness. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our amazing principals at all 4 schools. They have been working exceedingly hard to make sure that all of their students, classified employees, and teachers have what they need to be successful in the classroom. So thank you to Principal Kurtenbach, Principal Topalian, Principal Foray, and Principal Dr. Lin. In addition to that, we did have the opportunity to go on some classroom visits this week, and I accompanied Board Member Chang and Board Member Chong. We went to Huntington Middle School, and Dr. Topalian was kind enough to escort us around the campus. We went into a variety of different classrooms. It was great to see teachers engaged in teaching and students engaged in learning. It was just really exciting to see that happening in real time. The board members were afforded the opportunity to ask questions as we move through those classrooms, and Principal Topalian was great about hosting and responding to those questions. We then went to the high school, walked through several classrooms with Principal Kurtenbach, and we even had a very entertaining demonstration of inertia in Scott Barton's classroom. And it was actually engaging. We had both Mr. Barton and Mr. Kurtenbach demonstrate having several objects on a tablecloth on a table and pulling the tablecloth out from underneath those objects that were stationary and did not fall off of the table when they pulled the tablecloth off. And I have that on video, and I do plan to share it on social media to give everybody the benefit of seeing that. But it was quite entertaining, and the kids were very, very engaged in that hands-on learning experience. So that was really wonderful to see. We're going to continue to escort board members to classrooms and take them on classroom visits, hoping to get Mr. Kalaki and President Ryan and Vice President Nam Jack out there as soon as we possibly can, depending on their schedules. They're also busy. So we're just trying to coordinate calendars to get you all out there as well. And so we are working on that. And it'll be great fun for all of you. In addition to that, we did have coffee and conversation events with Board President Ryan and myself. We had a virtual opportunity on Zoom. We had about 18 attendees at the elementary. We had an in-person coffee and conversation where we had about the same number of parents here in person. We then sent an invitation out to parents at the middle and high schools. We had 2 people show up to that one. So I'm going to be positive and assume that's because everybody is okay with what's happening right now, or didn't have a lot of questions, or maybe they were just overscheduled, or who knows. But we're going to continue to provide those opportunities for parents to come in and talk with the board president and myself about any issues they have of concern. We want to be open and communicative and transparent, and work really well with our partnerships with parents. So we're going to continue to offer those. In addition to all of those things, I'm very, very excited to actually acknowledge that we have 3 board members this evening who have graduated from the Masters in Governance program. Previously, we had Mrs. Chong graduate from the Masters in Governance program offered by the California School Boards Association. And we have with us Yvette Kim. And for those of you who do not know this about Yvette, she was an assistant to Portantino. And so she would come over here and do a lot of work on, was it student suicide prevention and mental health that she was very actively engaged in. And so now she has transitioned to a position with CSBA. And so it's lovely to see you again. And thank you so much for being here. But I do want to acknowledge that Mr. Kalaki, President Shelley Ryan, sorry, I forgot your name, and board member Chang have all graduated from the program. And you have certificates. And so I'm going to pass them around. This is Mr. Chang's certificate of completion. And this is Mr. Kalaki's certificate of completion. And this is President Shelley Ryan's certificate of completion. So thank you so much for working through that program. I know that it took a lot of your time and commitment. There were 5 modules that each board member had to complete. And we're so very grateful that you took the time and devoted the energy in getting through that program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
And that's all for me.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Delatorre. Next, we have communications from the student board member.
Over the past few weeks, we've been preparing for our first in-person assembly, which is going to be next Friday. And then we have our in-person coronation, which will take place on October 2nd. And then following the week after is our homecoming, October 8th. So it's been going to be like really busy month for us, I guess. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, communications from the audience regarding matters on the information agenda are to be made at this time. Dr. Choi?
Okay, thank you, President Ryan. We are pausing for 1 minute to take requests regarding matters in the information items section of the agenda. If you would like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. We have 30 seconds remaining. If you would like to make a request to speak regarding matters in the information items section of the agenda, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. Okay, President Ryan, we have no requests.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. And with that, the information items 12A, student enrollment report, Dr. Linda Delatorre and Lou Chang.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the Board of Education, student board member, and executive team. This evening, I am going to be presenting a presentation on our enrollment. The Board of Education asked that staff prepare this and keep them apprised as to the relevant information that we will need to make critical decisions moving forward. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Lu Jiang for her support and assistance in really managing the data that you are going to see up on the screen this evening. I'm pressing the arrow.
It's too far. Go ahead.
It's too far.
Try now.
Do you want me to press it for you?
Oh, there we go. Okay, success. So you've all heard me talk a lot about declining enrollment. It is not unique to San Marino. It is something that we are experiencing within the state of California. Demographic projections from the California Department of Finance suggest that California's public TK through 12 school system is entering a long period of declining enrollment. As a matter of fact, by 2027-28, statewide enrollment is projected to fall nearly 7%, and that's compared to 1.5% over the last decade. California has 160,000 fewer students in the 2020-21 school year, reducing the state's overall enrollment by 3%. Enrollment is projected to shrink in about half of all counties within the state of California, and declines are expected in more of the state's larger counties, especially LA County. So we are going to experience a higher rate of decline than many other counties in the state. Yes, thank you. Okay. So why is declining enrollment important for us to be aware of and to consider and plan for? Number one, there's a lack of funding associated with declining enrollment. As our board is aware, we receive the bulk of our funding for student enrollment and the ADA, or average daily attendance. We can offer fewer programs. We will be forced to offer fewer programs if we have fewer students. So it is a numbers game. The reason that we're able to offer such a comprehensive and robust program at both the middle and high school is simply because of the numbers of students that we have. The fewer students we have, the fewer offerings we will be able to provide. And many districts that are in declining enrollment are looking at consolidating school sites. La Cañada many years ago went to a grade 7 through 12 campus. And so that is something that many school districts are looking at. As I'm sure you're aware, many schools have closed in neighboring communities. Pasadena is one of those communities that has been forced to look at closing schools. And so that is a conversation that is alive and well in the state of California, in many counties, especially Los Angeles. Next slide, please. So I wanted to show the board the projected versus actual enrollment for 21-22, because it really illustrates that we weren't that far off in our projections versus our actuals. And the way that we do this is we roll up the numbers in each grade level. So for kindergarten for this year, we would roll that number up to first grade, and we would roll first grade up to second, and second to third, and so on and so forth. And then we would look at an average for the number of TK and kindergarten students that we project we're going to get. And that is how we come up with our projections. And so we were pretty close this year as compared to previous years. And you can see that our projection was 2,681, and we are actually, and this is as of today's date, because we wanted to make sure that the board had accurate and up-to-date information, which is subject to change, but as of today, 2,701 students enrolled district-wide. Yes.
That includes all of our independent studies in the grade levels,
Yes.
right?
Independent study students are included in those totals. Next slide, please. This slide shows a very long history of progressive declining enrollment over time. And you can see in 2009-10, we were actually up to 3,228 students. That number is the right number for our school district. I think that is the optimal number of students for San Marino schools. That's where we'd like to be. And you can see that from that year forward, we have progressively been declining in enrollment. To the current period 21-22 at the very bottom of the screen, far right-hand column, we currently have 2,701 students. Next slide. This is just a cover for a 6-year enrollment comparison for Huntington Middle School and San Marino High School. Next slide. So we're going to start with Huntington Middle School, and this is an accounting of enrollment from 2016-17 to the current year. So you can see in the bottom row, the total row, you see 777 students in 2016-17. And we declined to 242 in 17-18, 2018-19, 693. And then fast forward to today, we're at 626. So there's a very steady decline there. Next slide. And this is a graphic of the numbers that I just showed you, which just illustrates it in a different way. But you can see that bar on the top is going down, not up. And so this is a trend that we hope to stabilize and possibly reverse going forward. Next slide. San Marino High School, you can see in the total row in 2016-17, we had 1,110 students. In 2017-18, we went down to 1,109. That was very close, right? Just one student different. We went to 1,105 in 18-19, and fast forward to today's number, which is 871. Next slide. And again, this is a graphic illustration that shows you that it was pretty stable between 16-17 and 18-19. And then it starts to go down in 19-20 to today's number for 21-22.
Question for you, Linda.
Yes.
These numbers, 1027, like for example, 2019-20, what snapshot of is that? Is that September or October?
It is, hold on one second and I'll get it for you. It's the beginning of school through the end of school. So it would be the full 2016-17 year, and the number 1,110 would have been where we ended up.
So that's where we're getting our ADA number according to that number.
Yeah, we get our P2 number in the spring, and that's what we're funded on. But we needed to compare apples to apples. So we're using where we ended up in the school year to compare to where we ended up now. But 2021 is the beginning of the year because we don't have the end of the year information yet.
Okay, thank you.
So that could change. It's to be determined, and we'll keep the board apprised of that number as we go through. Next slide. So we wanted to just show you the summary in a percentage format. So Huntington Middle School's enrollment dropped by 19.43% compared to 2016-17, and San Marino High School's enrollment dropped by 21.53% compared to 16-17. So that's pretty substantive when you look at the entire state of California declining by 3% in enrollment overall. And of course, our enrollment numbers are a lot lower than the entire state, so it's all relative. But those are numbers that we really do need to pay attention to. Okay, next slide. So a question that the board often poses is, why are students leaving our district? What are the reasons why? And we have started to track that information so that we can hopefully collect data and then use it to figure out what we can do to encourage people to stay, to maybe change course offerings, to do something to stabilize our enrollment and possibly even grow our enrollment. So you can see that this chart shows the summary for the numbers of students who have left our schools from 2017 through 2021, and 2021 is on the top. So if you just look at 2021 and you go across, the first column is transferred to a California public school. So more often than not, as Mrs. Jiang and I look through that data, these are students who moved out of San Marino and transferred to another California public school, or they were on an interdistrict and they went back to their district of residency or their school of residency. Then you see in the third column over, transferred to California private school. So this is the number of students who transferred to a private school from the accrual period of, and I don't have my glasses, 5/27 through September 8th, 2021. Hopefully I'm reading that correctly. You guys feel free to correct me if I'm not. So 75 students. And then one of the questions that would come up, well, how does that compare to prior years, right? So if you look down, 2020, there were 94 students that transferred to private schools. In 2019, there were 108 students that transferred to private schools. 2018, 67, and 2017, 47. So compared to last year, we're not doing, we're not doing worse than we did last year. We're doing better than we did last year. And we're doing much better than we did in 2019. Is that right? Yeah, 2019. So I thought that that was interesting because I thought that maybe we would see that number spike, in response to the pandemic, and it didn't. So it actually went down over last year. So moving to the fourth column over, we have, yes, sir.
I'm sorry, just a
Mhm.
quick question on that issue. Do we have any information that shows other students that entered the district, that they have come into the district from a private school?
Lou would have that information. I do not have that information as part of this presentation because again, this presentation is focusing on declining enrollment, but I can certainly get that information for the board. Yeah, thank you. So looking at the fourth column over, which says moved out of state, we had 28 students who left the state of California. And I was looking at that list and it was states like Texas, Arizona, Tennessee, Idaho, places like that. Then we have fifth column over the number of students who graduated. That's why they left. So you guys don't, I mean, that's not as important as the rest of this. And then the next column over is moved out of country. So this year we had 18 that actually left the country. Then we have exit the special education program, 0 students for this year. And then no show, we had 4 students who enrolled and never showed up. We had 3 that were temporary transfers. And then of course, 0 who passed away. And I'm not sure what other reasons would be. I'll ask Lou and get that information back to the board. So we had a total of 485 students that left San Marino during that accrual period. Any questions about this particular slide? Okay, we can move to the next slide. This is just a graphic illustration of the calendar that we use for registration and enrollment. So we start accepting kindergarten applications in March. In May, that's when we start accepting interdistrict applications. By June 15th, we are working really hard with the principals to review our staffing and enrollment plans. July 30th, staffing is confirmed based on enrollment. And then of course, this year, the first day of school was August 11th. Next slide. This is an illustration of the district-wide enrollment numbers and percentages by school year. This is an interesting slide because it will show you how the percentage of interdistrict students has increased over the years. So if you go all the way to the bottom of this chart, 2014-15, slide all the way over to the right, where it says percentage of interdistricts district-wide, you can say in 14-15, we had 15%. In 15-16, it went down to 14. 16-17, it went up to 16. 17-18, it was 17. 18-19, 19. 19-20, it was 21%. 2021, we went to 24, and currently we're at 27. So I just wanted the board to have this information. And then if you slide back over to the left, you can see the breakdown of the types of permits that we are accepting and the numbers of permits in each of the categories. So we have SMUSD, that means that they are employed by SMUSD. Those are the children of those employed. And then you have City of San Marino, individuals who are either police department, fire department, city hall employees. Those are the number of kids that are enrolled here in our schools. We have business owners within the City of San Marino that register their kids and enroll their kids, and other employment related 76. Those would be, somebody who works at Huntington Library as an example. They can enroll their children. Legacy permits, those are children of our grandparents who have taken advantage of the legacy permit. And then we have regular interdistrict students, and a lot of those students are kids who lived here at one point, and their families have moved out of the city, and they were able to receive a release from their district, and they were allowed to continue in their education. So we have a total of 731 interdistrict students. Any questions on this slide?
For the legacy permit, maybe we need for more because each day I have some outbox, but they don't know.
Okay.
And then I remind them, and then someone said, "Is that true?" I said, "Yeah, it's true."
Okay, that's good to know, and we will get something out.
So I think somehow maybe some way.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, Mrs. Chong.
I'm wondering, I have a question, because I know that a lot of other districts are making it more difficult to release their students.
Yes.
Has that been a problem for us in terms of wanting to take a student for some reason and then them not being able to get released, especially lately?
Yes. There are a lot of districts who are taking a hard stand and not releasing students to come to our schools. However, what tends to happen is those families will appeal with the Los Angeles County Office of Education, and they go through the appeals process. And typically LACO will overturn in the parent's favor. Sometimes they won't. So it just depends on the circumstances and the reasons why they want to attend San Marino schools. So if there is a program that we have at our high school that is not available to them in their district of residency, that might be a reason why LACO is going to honor and uphold their appeal and allow them to come here.
And have we done examinations as to what is attractive to other people to apply to us in the first place?
We have looked at that in the past. We really need to continue that conversation and look at programs that are not available elsewhere that would distinguish us in this area. I literally think that we are competing for every student within our district boundaries. I have unfortunately signed releases for our students in San Marino to attend Duarte schools.
So I guess that would be the other flip side of that, is in trying, other than simply trying to attract more people, we really need to examine why we're losing our people.
Yes,
as well.
exactly. And we are already doing that work with the principals, particularly at the secondary level. Dr. Richter, Principal Kurtenbach, the assistant principal, and of course, Principal Topalian are going to be meeting and talking about their course offerings and really studying those issues to make recommendations to the board on potential changes.
I have to say, I was surprised by how many more we lost to public school. I thought that number was lower than the private school number. So that was kind of strange. That just caught me off guard.
Yeah. And I think there is a rumor out there in the community that we're losing kids to private schools, right? But if you look at these numbers, we have lost more kids to public schools because they've moved. And that was the reason why they went to another California public school, because they moved out of the community, not because they didn't like our school district or they were dissatisfied.
Well, I do know people who left LA County because they
Right.
weren't happy with LA
Right.
County this
Yeah.
year.
Right.
So to Ms. Chan's point, though, for those that left to go to other public schools,
Mhm.
do we know the reason why? For example, is it just because they moved?
Yeah, so there's a variety of different reasons, and we have that detail, which I will share with the board. It's not part of this presentation, but I do have that as backup to this presentation. I'm happy to get that out to you so that you can look at that.
For this reason, I did hear from some of the parent comment. They
Mhm.
go to other public school. They think that they go other public school, maybe have more chance go to a college
Mhm.
because of the grading issue.
Mhm.
Well, I don't know if that is true, but actually, we really, I think our high school really need to pay attention on this issue. I've been told for so many parents each year that when college admission, the news come out and they make the comment said, our grading is too tight. I don't know if that's true or not.
We met with our principals today, and we're going to meet again on Friday. And we're going to talk about all of these issues. And so we'll get back with the board on the actual facts versus some of the rumors that are out there. So we will provide that data to you.
We have a number that's to the number of students that we have released to other public schools for
Again, I don't have that here tonight, but I can get that for you. The number, you want the number of kids that we have signed releases for. And we have a variety of different reasons why we do that, because we as a school district are not just signing off on those anymore without having a compelling reason. So as an example, I signed 2 releases for 2 siblings who have never been enrolled in our schools. They have always been enrolled in South Pasadena schools, so they have never been here. It's not like we're losing them. They're not leaving us. They've just never been here. And so they wanted to continue their education in South Pasadena because the mom works for South Pasadena Unified School District in some capacity. So there's lots of reasons why, but the most surprising for me is the handful that I've signed to go to the School of the Arts in Doherty.
But the recently you see the housing market, the
Mhm.
price in the Samanina below the 2.5 million is very strong.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I heard some of the younger generation will go back.
Yeah.
So because the West Los Angeles, you want to buy the same square feet, you probably have to spend more.
Right.
So then they choose the Samanina close to the downtown.
Mhm.
So maybe we should put a new company,
Mhm.
send some of the within car or whatever, and then some.
Yeah.
The reception.
All ideas and suggestions are welcome at this point. We want to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to connect people with our schools, to get them enrolled. And one of the things the high school is doing is they're going to have a showcase in October, which is like an open house, and they're doing that very early so that they can highlight and showcase all of the wonderful programs that we have available at San Marino High School. And that would happen before parents are applying to private schools.
Will part of that showcase is focused on programs that we have at our high school, that other public high schools do not. To maybe encourage people from other districts to give them a justification.
Yes.
Use that as a reason for internet transfer.
Yes, I think that's really important for us to keep in mind. when we're looking at course offerings and programs. I recall Glendora Unified, at their high school, they had a bagpipes program, which is very unique, right? And so people would get released from their school districts to go to Glendora for their bagpipes program. And I'm not suggesting that we do that. I don't know that there's a wide market for people who want to go into bagpipes, but we should certainly, think about innovative and progressive programs, articulated pathways to colleges and universities. And we're so fortunate to have Dr. Richter rolling up her sleeves and really working hard on those ideas and suggestions with the principals. So we're really excited about what the future might hold. Okay, next slide, please. Sure. So our next steps, we are going to continue to market and brand our programs and course offerings. We're going to continue to consider them. We want to enhance our social media presence. We were talking with the principals about that today. We want to create our own Facebook page that is constantly being populated with positive messages about all the wonderful things that are happening at our schools. We are going to meet regularly with principals. We're going to look at our staffing and our enrollment and make sure that we have a staffing plan that is commensurate with our enrollment, so that when enrollment declines, we're not overstaffed. And then as some of you have mentioned, we want to market our transitional kindergarten programs. We want to do that at neighboring preschools. We've also talked about possibly even having our own preschool program, which could serve as a feeder for us in the future. And so we would love the opportunity to talk more about that idea with the board going forward. And then we're going to continue to collect and evaluate, analyze exit survey data so that we know why people are leaving. And if we see any patterns and trends, we're going to bring that to the board to keep you as informed as possible. Next slide.
Can I just?
Yes.
Oh, is the next slide question?
Yes. Well, I wasn't going to, end the presentation without offering an opportunity to ask questions.
With the enhanced social media presence, right? And we've talked about this before. The last time I was on the board.
Yeah.
To just make sure that we get, sign-offs from releases from all of our children, so we don't have any missteps.
Right. So we will, our principals are very well aware of that. We will get signed releases from children that are photographed. We are able to photograph, the back as long as it's not identifiable, right? But you can photograph the back of a student with their head down working. And so we're really going to be quite careful about that. A lot of it will be posts like Twitter. Most of that is just going to be, brief statements about maybe the football team winning, celebrate Titan football and with the score or something like that. And so those kinds of posts will not even have an image accompanying it. But I hear you, and we know better than that now. So any other questions, comments, concerns? It is our desire to keep the board apprised of enrollment as we move through the year. So we will look for the information that you've asked for. I'll bring back the number of releases signed this year and the detailed information for why people are leaving. I have that narrative as backup that I'll share with the board.
So my question is, and maybe this is for Dr. Richter, do we have any numbers or indication as we, for the last couple of years, have looked at pathways, dual enrollment, when we're looking at specialty courses like we have with Caltech and Huntington Library, when we're looking at courses potentially like medical arts, what are we seeing as we move forward on these projections? Like, do we have any numbers that say if we move forward in this pathway, we're going to see these numbers come in or the interest in that. And that's how we're going to develop the programs as we go.
Yes, and is that for me?
Whoever
For
wants
you,
to.
oh, okay, sorry. Yes, that data, we can absolutely pull that data. And one conversation that we have been having with Mr. Kurtenbach and Mr. Cassenpay is when we're looking at expanding programs or expanding CTE pathways, we really need to look at what the data is telling us, what students' interests are, what courses they're taking, where there's a high interest in certain areas, certain industry sectors for CTE pathways, and then possibly even putting out a survey to gauge interest in certain pathways, because we want to build something where students will come and students are interested in, and at the end of that pathway, that capstone, that certification, or whatever it may be, we want it to be valuable to our students in our community as well. So to be able to build something based on interest and what our data is showing us, I think is going to be key.
Right. Thank you. And as we build out, we have to be mindful that if we look at the data from, say, a sixth grader and we plan ahead for him for eighth grade, ninth grade, and then we bring in the 10th grade, that's going to be more beneficial, because if you survey a 10th grader, by the time you've lifted the program off the ground, he's almost a senior, right? So we know how education works. And so we have to have those projections, or we have to be able to use the data to inform our decisions. I don't want us to blindly just go into a program and then not know, why we're building out or what the interest is.
Absolutely. And if I may, President Ryan, one of the conversations we had was really looking at the vertical pathway from elementary to middle to high school, so that when our students do enter a pathway, even at the early years, that commitment is there to see the program through or the pathway through, because that would retain students as well, because they're participating in a rigorous, relevant, interesting pathway that they have selected, and hopefully that commitment will be there to see it through their senior year.
Well, so I guess mine is more of a comment and sort of a caution as we move forward. Once we start opening this can of worms of why are our students leaving, we need to look at it at different points in time, because typically you have various exit points. You have elementary transition into middle school transition into high school. And I think there's going to be very different reasons. At the elementary school, most common refrain is always class size. There is always a concern and that our class sizes are too big, especially when we get to fourth grade, because we have a class size reduction incentive to keep our class sizes smaller. Once we get to the middle school, I think we take a lot of heat for things that we can't help because they're hormonal 12 and 13-year-olds and nobody's happy then. But there are certainly things that we as a district can do to alleviate the transitional stress. And then in high school, I think Mr. Chang is right in saying that college and concern over that becomes a big part of it. And that's where counseling appropriately for students to choose the right coursework, to choose those right pathways, to be guided through that college process really kick in. And I guess here's my cautionary note on that. That all takes resources, and that's maybe more resources than we have at our disposal as a small school district, faced with declining enrollment. So I think for me, my concern is if we're going to be responsible and looking at being committed to programs, that we are going to follow through, that we are not going to start something without a commitment to see it through to the end for a student all the way through. I think at that point, we needed to really ask some difficult questions about what we're willing to prioritize and who we are and what we're putting first, ensuring that our students are going to be academically and socially, emotionally healthy, and that our parents are going to be socially, emotionally healthy through that process too, because I think our parents get very stressed out about it, which often translates into stress for the kids and for everyone we're navigating it. So I don't necessarily have a question or a comment, but more of a, let's really be thoughtful in how we use that data, that as we ask those questions, we're actually willing to follow through and make some decisions that are going to actually make a difference. And in addition to that, I think instruction and making sure we continue to advance and innovate in our instruction. I think that's something that we really need to be asking questions that may not be coming from our parents and from our students, but that's where we need to be engaging with our faculty and our staff to really be thoughtful about what we as a district can do to support our faculty and our staff to be successful in bringing innovation into the classroom. Right?
Thank you.
I was just going to ask, is there any data available to us that shows some of the districts across the state that have started distance learning academies having the ability to pull students from other districts in an inter-district transfer setting into their district, into their distance learning academy that may help show that that might be a viable way of possibly increasing enrollment of our.
So I don't know of any available data on that, but I did speak with the principals today during our meeting about researching that. There are a couple neighboring districts that do have a school within a school model that we're going to look at, and we can bring information back to the board on that. But we're looking at that. We're looking at that to see if it's viable or not.
So I appreciate that. I'm not sure if it's viable or not as an idea, but is there any potential that maybe there might be the ability to have either student interns or teacher assistant students that might be able to do some of that research by calling around and helping sort of formulate information, calling around the different districts across the state to see who has those programs. Is that something that might be?
It is possible. I would also, I would check with the California Department of Education first to see if they have any accounting of that information. And so our staff can do that. It's just a matter of, collecting that information and seeing who has it. And so we're gonna be looking into that as it is. And so when we collect that information, we'll share it with the board. You're welcome.
All right. So with that, next we have 12B, Student Progress Monitoring Update. The information item is for the Board of Education to provide a brief update on student monitoring progress. Dr. Lennon Rector, please.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the board, student board member, and executive team. Oops. Tonight, I'm pleased to provide you with a brief update on SMUSD student progress monitoring efforts. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide the board with a brief update on the district's current student progress monitoring efforts, highlight those supports and strategies, as well as interventions that we have offered to support student learning and address any potential learning gaps and regression. And lastly, share with the board our next steps. As we welcomed our students back to school after a little more than a year and a half, it was clear that our initial focus and priority was set on building relationships, strengthening student connectedness, and providing relevant and rigorous instructional learning opportunities. In addition to welcoming students back to school and acclimating or oftentimes reacclimating students back to school practices and routines, our teachers have all done an amazing job at establishing and strengthening student engagement and connectedness, which plays a critical role in laying students' foundation for academic and social emotional success for both our students who are attending school in person and independent study. This foundation continues to be laid through the hard work of our teachers, our staff, and our administrators, through the work that they do collectively through professional collaboration, PBIS, which is Positive Behavior Instruction and Supports, WEB, which is where everybody belongs, and Link Crew. San Marino Unified School District also understands the need to identify potential learning gaps, especially as our students have returned back to school, to best develop opportunities for targeted supports and interventions that would address identified gaps or regressions in learning. District-wide, over these past 4 weeks, our teachers, staff, and administrators once again have been working hard to assess and monitor student progress for the purpose of providing timely, targeted supports and interventions. Many of the measures utilized to assess student progress are listed on this slide. As you can see, STAR reading assessments, unit and course-based assessments, English language arts, math assessments, skill-based assessments, SIPS, which assesses phonics and sight words, Achieve 3000, which assesses phonics, fluency, reading, and writing, multiple measure assessments, which may include a variety of formal and informal assessments and interventions, course request changes that may indicate the need for additional support for many students, progress reporting or progress monitoring, wellness center referrals, various site-specific measures, and teachers' formal and informal observation and evaluation, which may be just as valuable as any assessment given in the classroom. Again, priority has been set on assessing student learning early on in effort to gather actionable data from which appropriate supports and interventions can be implemented in a timely manner. So this slide does provide us with many of the ongoing assessments that have been implemented and provided to our students once school began to really address areas where students may be needing additional support so that they can continue to succeed academically and social emotionally. Through ongoing student progress monitoring, teachers and school staff are able to design and offer appropriate support and interventions for eligible students. This slide includes but does not limit the various supports and interventions provided as a result of student progress monitoring to help promote the continuity of learning. Student progress is closely monitored throughout the supports and interventions to assess student progress or to determine whether the provided supports need to be adjusted or increased to best support students' individual needs. As evident on this slide, the types of support and interventions vary based on student needs. Supports and interventions are offered to students needing support in person as well as independent study, although some may not be accessible for students in independent study due to the fact that they may need to be physically on campus. Offered supports include, but are not limited to, academic tutoring, which we saw earlier through many of the board documents, small group interventions, support through an elementary reading specialist or counselor, interventionist outreach and support services, student study teams, wellness center outreach, including the wellness center coordinator and interns, counseling and support. We have many of our counselors who have been reaching out to students individually to do check-ins and to see if any support is needed academically or social emotionally. Teachers and site administrators have also had opportunities to work collaboratively to analyze student progress data, instructional supports, and lesson design to best support the varying needs of students through grade level or department meetings and curriculum planning days, professional development opportunities such as UDL and multi-tiered system of supports to best design scaffolded interventions for all students, all levels. The Elementary Universal Screener Review Committee is also working to identify a comprehensive screener or diagnostic tool to further monitor student progress in ELA and math multiple times throughout the year to gather formal, actionable data from which appropriate instruction and support can be provided to address learning gaps. Next steps for San Marino Unified School Districts. Next steps is supporting the continuity of learning and strategies for addressing identified learning regression, include the commitment to providing continuous professional development grounded in UDL, ELD, PBIS, and MTSS to best provide relevant learning scaffolds, opportunities conducive to all learners. Excuse me, this mask is a little constricting. Site administrators and teachers will continue to engage in collective professional learning through grade level and department collaboration meetings to analyze assessment data and evaluate the effectiveness of implemented interventions. A strong focus has already been placed and will continue to be placed on formal and informal assessments and observations to best design and implement. Excuse me, can I take this off?
Yes. why
Thank
don't
you.
Suzanne?
Thank you.
Water?
No, I'm
Oh, you
fine.
have water here.
It was just hard to breathe.
Okay.
Staff will continue to receive professional development in and continue to design and implement multi-tiered systems of support that monitor student progress and increase support intensity as needed. The Elementary Universal Screening Committee will continue their work in curating the appropriate universal screener to help assess student progress in ELA and math and provide longitudinal. Oh, sorry. I'll have to pull it off. My apologies. It was a little hard to breathe, but I'll pull it off. Thank you. The Elementary Universal Screener Review Committee will continue their work in curating the appropriate universal screener to help assess student progress in ELA and math and provide longitudinal student outcome data within and across years to help design effective, targeted learning opportunities and interventions. Lastly, while state indicators are waived from being reported on the dashboard for accountability purposes, state data results for districts that administered the CASP in 2021 may have their data included on the California School Dashboard under additional reports. So that data may be available locally. It's fine, thank you. Thank you, yes. May be available locally for our school district to continue to analyze student progress data. Review and analysis of this data will also help to serve in identifying areas of strength and needed growth from which additional and appropriate supports can be implemented to further promote student learning. The 2021 California School Dashboard is expected to be publicly released early to mid-November. So we're awaiting that data. And that is the end of my presentation. I am happy to take any questions that you may have. My apologies, it feels like I'm breathing in my mask.
I have a question.
Yes.
For this page, student always monitoring. So looks like a lot of program of the. But I would like to know each one who will monitor the student.
Are you referring, Mr. Chang, to this page?
Yeah, student always monitoring.
Yes. So it depends. So much of the monitoring is happening within the classroom with the teachers, the educational assistants, because the students are working closely with their peers in the classrooms. And so when the teachers are administering instruction, they're obviously engaging in informal observation, as well as looking and analyzing data that is being provided to the teachers through unit assessments, end of unit tests, benchmark testing, STAR reading, AR reading, course content, submission of work that the students have been doing. So all around, most of the review is being done by the teachers. And teachers have opportunities throughout the weeks to work collaboratively together at grade level meetings, during professional development time, and curriculum days. Our teachers have 4 curriculum days throughout the year to which engage in professional dialogue, conversation, and learning to best look at data, analyze the data, and share best practices to support students who may be struggling or need additional support in certain areas.
My concern or my expectation, I think for the 2 pages, a lot of variety, look like there's a good format, but I'm thinking it's just like a research. So then after a couple months or several months, how we collect the data and then the teacher analyze the data. Either they share the data together and go to the principal and then they have the workshop and then through those student data and then see how the student will improve or is that they still have room to improve. So I think the next step probably is to think about the process, how we can be the quantify or to get the interpret the result, yeah.
Right, okay, and if,
And then, share with the students, say, oh, you have to do this, and then you can improve.
right,
I'm interested to know how, yeah, we can go to that stage.
okay, so if I understood correctly, Mr. Tang, your question or thought is how are we going to continue to monitor student data? How are we going to continue to analyze student data and have those productive conversations among our colleagues to best support our students? Our teachers are experts in doing this, whether it's a formal assessment or just basic teacher observation. I shouldn't say basic, but teacher observation, right? They are the experts in the classroom. Even without giving an assessment, oftentimes teachers can already evaluate students' ability in certain areas. But with all of these assessments that our teachers are continuously offering our students, it's not a one-time assessment that's being offered to the students. They're offered continuously, especially like with unit tests, with the STAR reading assessment, with course-specific contents, pre-test, post-test. Those are ongoing throughout the year. Because as we know, when students progress from month to month, their needs may change, right? And so the ongoing data analysis and evaluation is going to be key. It's creating those systems and those opportunities where teachers can engage in those conversations. That's going to be the key point. Right now, we do have professional time built in with grade level meetings, department meetings. So they do have that opportunity. We also have 4 curriculum days, full curriculum days for our teachers to engage in collaboration. Our independent study teachers are taking advantage of those curriculum days as well, because they're working together as a grade level. They're also engaging in dialogue with the teachers in person to better build and support students in needs. So that's ongoing. These assessments and evaluations that are listed here are not administered only one time. It is ongoing throughout the year.
That's, all of the different progress monitoring tools that are on the slide. Obviously very helpful in giving us information. Are all of these also being implemented with our independent study students so that we can properly monitor the progress as far as the STAR reading assessment, the accelerated reader program, and so on? Is that all equally being applied to independent study students?
Many of these are. STAR reading is not administered at both elementary levels. And so it's difficult to do that during the independent study. So independent study, in addition to some of these, have created their own interventions that they're utilizing to gauge student learning or student gaps in students' learning. But a lot of these, the unit tests, the thematic tests, the progress monitoring, Achieve 3000, those are being utilized with our independent study students. Counselor outreach, that counselors are also reaching out to students who are in independent study to do check-ins and to make sure that they're progressing or if they have any needs academically or social emotionally. And then we are, I'm sorry, Mr. Faggy. And then we're continuing to identify ways, because it's, to support our students in elementary is a little bit easier because they have one teacher or one, it's a multiple subject credentialed teacher. In secondary, you have multiple classes where students are taking a variety of different courses. So the support is going to look very different. So that is what we're working closely on with the principals to identify how we can better support our students at that level.
I mean, I can understand that the elementary level, you've got independent study teacher that has
Second,
second grade and then third through
fifth, correct.
okay. So they're dealing with 3 different grade levels.
Correct.
4 different. With the secondary, you're going from 6th right through 12th, and not just 6th through 12th, but a wide variety of whatever classes
Courses.
secondary in the high school.
Correct.
Are the independent study teachers receiving the same ability? I understand you're talking about 4 days with the teachers who are on campus. Is it equally just 4 days for those independent study teachers, or is it potentially a different number because they have such a broader spectrum of courses and years that they're doing?
They're currently offered the 4 days. Should the request come that additional days are needed, which we have not received yet, then that is something that we can definitely think about. But Mrs. Fong, who is our secondary independent study teacher, is doing a fantastic job of really monitoring student progress. And when students have questions, she does provide office hours throughout the week, in addition to more than just 1 day of synchronous instruction, which is required by AB 130. So she is going above and beyond to make sure that our students have learning opportunities more than just what the law dictates. And in addition, she is reaching out to those parents because she's monitoring progress throughout, like on a daily basis. So students who are not logging in, students who are not participating in independent studies, she does a fantastic job of reaching out to the parents via email or telephone call to say, Lena has not logged in for 2 days, what's going on? She needs to make sure she's on track to finish the coursework.
I will say that the information that I'm receiving from parents in the independent study program is that they truly do believe that the teacher is doing everything that she possibly can. They're very appreciative of her. And some of the offers of suggestions for improvement are definitely not focused on the teacher, but more on the opportunity to provide, for example, at the secondary level, meaningful writing. Their concerns were our secondary students are not learning how to write in this text program. And they're either not having the opportunity to provide substantial writing or receive a lot of input back on their writing. Things.
Right.
I don't have all the details of that, just sort of conveying some of the, they're definitely very thankful.
That's good to hear.
But is that, how do we handle that as far as progress on writing for the students in secondary?
So that is one thing that when Mrs. Fong and I were talking about, that was one area that we looked at where there is not a lot of opportunity through the coursework that's offered through Apex for the writing, like they don't have a writing class. So Ms. Fong is offering, when she does her synchronous instruction, she's providing opportunities for students to engage in writing, whether it's writing a summary, writing a report, and she does that twice a week. So students still are held accountable for practicing and engaging in their writing skills. It's not the same as having an in-person, writing class, but we do recognize that that is an area where is not focused on as much as we would like to see it with independent study, because independent study right now is the only option that we have as a school district to offer to our students who are not in person. And through the coursework of Apex, which is an WASC accredited program, we're following their curriculum and their coursework. But Ms. Fong has gone a step above that to provide opportunities for students to engage in writing.
It seems, definitely students that are on campus are learning how to write firm papers. And we just want to make sure that the study students moving through secondary school level and getting close to entering college, they also.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So I understand independent study provides a floor upon which to
Okay, and I appreciate you sharing that with me. I did write it down so we can look further into that. Absolutely.
On that note, then I guess, and this speaks to some of the stuff that we had, sorry, bad use of the word. Some of the items we had approved in the consent agenda regarding the homework club and the academic interventions so the question I had asked earlier, I think we're circling back to, is how are students identified to take advantage of that? How are they accessing that? Is that something independent study students can go to as well if they're struggling with some of the content that they're expected to cover on their own?
Absolutely. So a lot of the communications that are actually all of the communications that are sent out from the school sites, all of the students receive them. So students who are an independent study still are assigned to their home school. So all of the Blackboard messages, the Schoology messages, all the information that's pushed out is pushed out to all of the students, including our independent study students. So they receive all that information. So if there are opportunities for homework club or office hours, they are aware of those opportunities and they absolutely are able to take advantage of them. We haven't seen a lot of students take advantage because if they've indicated independent study, they're indicating that they have a health concern that would prevent them from coming on campus. So I could see, and that's why I stated earlier, many of those opportunities may not be applicable because they would have to come physically onto campus. The other question you had was how do they enter? So many of these students are referred by their teacher because assessments, multiple measures have indicated that there's a need for additional support in certain areas. Some of the opportunities that are offered, students self-select to participate, like a homework club during lunchtime or office hours. The same way independent study students do. Office hours are offered in the afternoon. Students have the opportunity to log in and ask for additional help or ask for clarification or guidance. Those are all students can self-select to do that.
So there are virtual office hours for independent study students as well?
No, unfortunately, there are not, at this point, there are not virtual office hours. Those virtual office hours are offered through the independent study teachers. So for elementary, that works beautifully. For secondary, it's a little bit more challenging. And that's something that we're working on to identify ways which we can provide virtual office hours to our secondary students.
I have other questions, but I don't want to take it all up if other people do. So I had two other questions. So do we have a sense of where we're at with where our students are at this point in time compared to where they would normally be at? Because I think when people talk about learning gaps, there's there's really three different definitions in my mind. There's the learning gaps where you see where the students in other school districts like Los Angeles Unified, they just didn't show up at all. I mean, those kids they didn't get any instruction for a year and a half. I think for our students, it's not necessarily what we're talking about, but there were maybe curriculum gaps that didn't get covered, or maybe there was learning loss based on San Marino's standards. Do we have a sense at this point of what that looks like?
We do have some indication of what that looks like from feedback from our site principals and the feedback that they're receiving from their teachers. And it really just breaks down into two categories. One is, for lack of a better word, behavioral, just the reintegration back into school, following school policies, knowing the protocols, knowing the rules and the regulations of, attending school in person or even on Zoom, like what's expected, what's not expected for behavior. And the other area that they've identified is where they're seeing some gaps for students is really the reading and the writing for students. So those are areas that the teachers are really looking at and focusing on. That seems to be kind of the general consensus.
And then my last question had to do with more the something kind of slightly off topic, but commitment to ongoing professional development. Are we looking at that with an eye to evaluation of, is it effective? I mean, I know that we're talking about doing UDL and ELD and PBIS and MTSS, but I come from a background in a world where program evaluation and making sure that we're actually having the impact we're intending to have an impact on. Are we looking at some of that in conversations with our teachers and really looking at where to tweak and fine tune that?
Absolutely. And that discussion was actually had this morning when we were meeting with the principals, looking at the effectiveness of the professional development that we're offering. And there's two ways of looking at the feedback from our teachers, or are they finding it effective? And really the degree of implementation of what they're learning, right? Are we seeing that when we do classroom visits or instructional walkthroughs, is it being implemented? Because if it is, and it's being implemented with fidelity district-wide, then we know it's effective. The other piece is that feedback from our teachers. And we're going to continue to gather feedback from our teachers, because obviously with any professional development initiative, there's always room for growth or for change. And how do we tweak it to make it conducive to the needs of our teachers and our students?
Thank you.
So next, we're approaching the action items. So communication from the audience regarding matters on the action agenda are to be made at this time. Dr. Choi?
Thank you. We will pause for 1 minute to take requests to speak regarding matters in the action items section of the agenda. If you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. We have 30 seconds remaining. If you'd like to make a request to speak regarding matters in the action items section, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. Okay, President Ryan, we have one request. Okay, we have the
you.
San Marino Teachers Association. Your line is now open.
Thank you. As I listened to information that was shared, there was talk of why students have left or why families have left. We know that teachers were not hired back because of budget cuts, but we also have an entire grade level that did not return at one of the elementary schools, and we had teachers who were not on the RIF list who chose to leave our district. I bring this up at a time where you will now be talking about the financial reports, and I would just once again like to remind you that our teachers have not had a raise in 4 years, that responsibilities have increased, that the San Marino Unified School District is the only district in the San Gabriel Valley of which we know of that has not shared the rightfully earned monies that were granted for COVID relief. And as you spoke of the students who are doing online instruction and distance learning and all of these things, these are all issues that are not yet in place because we haven't talked about teacher impact and what teachers have needed to get things done. To the district's credit, Dr. Richter has worked with me and others to get schedules set and get teachers and student needs met. But once again, I have heard zero talk of teachers and their needs and why teachers have left. And I just hope that you will keep teachers in mind as you speak of the budget and what should be done to support teachers financially as well as in other ways needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, in 14A, unaudited actuals financial report fiscal year This is an action item. I'd like to not only welcome, but introduce or talk about Pearl Izuka. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, President Ryan, members of the board. I'm very pleased this evening to introduce to you our business services consultant, Pearl Izuka, who has a very impressive background in business services and public education. She is also an adjunct professor at USC in the School of Rosier, and she is training CBOs to become better at what they do in some cases, and aspiring CBOs to go into the profession. So she is here this evening to present to you on all of our business services related items. In addition, we have Director Vanjie Lingott in the audience to answer any questions as well. So I turn it over to you, Pearl.
Thank you. Good evening, Board President Ryan, members of the board, student board member, executive team, and members of the public. It's my pleasure tonight to talk with you about the unaudited actuals. And so it's this huge document that we'll be referencing. And just as a side note, this report, this format is known as the State Accounting Code Structured Document. Every school district in California has to report this. So LA Unified has the exact same report. They just add a little more zeros to their report. And so it's standard through all of California schools. But I'm going to give you a high level, and if you have questions on this, certainly we'll take them. But it's more to give you just a general overview. So we have a really short presentation, and we want to start out with the budget cycle. So what happened was, what we're talking about the entire 2021 school year, and we're at the end now, almost at the end. I'll give that caveat later. But last June, you adopted the budget for the 2021 school year. And then in December of last year, you presented your first interim. And then in March, you presented the second interim. And then in June, a few months ago, you presented what you believe would be the estimated actuals, and when you adopted this year's budget. And now we're coming before you to actually share with you how we ended the year officially. So we gave you an estimate in June, and now this is the actual unaudited actuals. It's unaudited in the sense that after you approve this, we then turn it over to our independent auditors, and then they finish up their work, and it turns into audited actuals after they do their work. And you will then see that in either December or January of this year. So that kind of completes that whole cycle. And so at some point, we're working on 3 budget cycles at a time, because we're working on last year's, and we're starting this year. And then in a few months, we're going to start planning for next year as well. So the unaudited actuals, as I mentioned, as reported in the state account code structure format, it does give you all the activities, although we're just going to be talking about our general operating budget. All the different funds of the district are also in your report there. So for example, the cafeteria fund, deferred maintenance, our capital projects, those funds are also in this report. And everything that's been done in terms of the expenditures and revenues are reported in the exact same manner. And then this report then is now turned over to our auditors, who will review it. And then we file this as well to the county, and the county reviews our unaudited actuals. Oops. So let's go on to how we ended last year. So we'll start with our revenues, and these are our basically 4 sources of our revenues. Our local control funding formula, which again is formulaic. It's based on average daily attendance times an amount that's given by grade level, and we'll share that in a few minutes, and actually in our next presentation on what that level is for each grade level. And that is the majority of the funding that this district receives. It's a combination of local property taxes along with state aid. So they decided that based on the number of students, you're entitled to get this much funding. They'll first take your property taxes, and then whatever is, needs to be backfilled is done with state aid. So some districts have more property taxes and have less state aid, and others have have a lot less property tax and they get a lot more state aid. The next item is your federal, and in this case, more than other years, this is where the COVID dollars were actually booked. And the next is state, and in there is lottery, also special education, and other state categorical programs. And then the next largest source of revenue is our local income. And in this category, we have the majority of it is where our parcel taxes are and where our local donations come in, and they're booked under local income. And so our total revenue in the 2021 year was 44.1 million. This kind of gives a graphic illustration of the revenues that we receive. And I just want to make a highlight here, the percentage that in comparison to the state unified school districts, we came in at our LCFF is at 58%, but statewide is about 75%. So you can see that we do not get the same percentage of funding as the typical unified school district. On the other hand, 31% is local income, and you compare that to a statewide average of 6%. So we are very fortunate with the generosity and the support that we have received from this community to provide that source of local income to this district. The next slide talks about the different expenditure categories that, now this is both unrestricted and restricted expenses, just in general overview. We had all the salaries and the corresponding benefits. And I just want to make a notation here, the benefits, what we're talking about here is our retirement system, STRS and PERS. We're talking about workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, and health benefits. They're all grouped together in this particular area. And then the next category is books and supplies, and then services. These are contracted services. They are your utility cost. They're a number of other kinds of services that legal, accounting services, all of that are in this particular category. And then capital, and then other outgo is when we transfer to other funds. So our total expenses were 36.5, almost 5 million. And this chart just illustrates the percentages of those particular expenses. And I just want to highlight that 82% of our budget is on people, okay? That we're talking about certificated salaries, classified salaries, and the corresponding benefits. And so when we were in that position where we were having to make reductions, we can only go to paper and pencils so far. When most of your budget is people, because we're a people business. And so that's the unfortunate part where when we have to make the reductions, that's where we need to go. So when we compare our revenue to our expenses, we had an excess of 7.7 million, and that was broken out between restricted and unrestricted. But I want to make a notation here that this is great news in terms of our fiscal stability and oversight. And it gives credit to this board for having good fiscal oversight and taking good, care of our funds. Because as we look to the future, as we were talking about declining enrollment, as we're going to talk about in the next presentation about the funding cliff that we're going to experience next year and beyond, this sets us up to be in a good place. Also, unknowing what the financial volatility might be in the future years, this leaves the district in a good place, in a good position. Saying that then, when we compare the revenues to expenditures and then add the beginning balance, staff has indicated that we designated the fund balance to go into these different categories, just as set asides for planning. And what at the next presentation, I'll talk about what we are proposing for this year, but this is how we designated that fund balance for this coming year. And lastly, we just want to make a recommendation that you approve the unaudited actuals and that we go ahead and then file this report with LA County Office of Education. With that, I'll take any questions on the unaudited actuals.
Mrs. Ryan, may I ask?
Yes.
So thank you so much for your presentation.
Sure.
I would like to know in terms of, the last slide, which is components of the ending balance.
Yes.
And there is $2.5 million assigned for declining enrollment. Can you tell me the components as to how we arrived at the 2.5 million?
Right. So we're figuring right now, and we'll talk about this more in our next presentation on the budget, but I'll address it right now. So we figured right now from the 2019-20 year to now, there's about a 200 student decline. And if we take an average of how much we feel that's per student, we came up with about 2.5 million. There's a little bit of cushion, but that also gives us for the future as well.
And you'll address that again at the.
Yes, yes.
I had a
Go ahead.
couple questions. The employee benefits increased 31.3%.
So you're comparing the unaudited actuals to what we budgeted?
Yes.
Okay, so again, we'll talk about the budget.
Okay.
In a few minutes, but there are kind of two standalone reports. The one on the left is what we're actually filing. And the way this report is set up, it's actually put side by the actual budget that you adopted in June.
Okay.
So this is what you adopted. And of course, we can always make revisions if we need to, but that's sort of the comparison that they've done. So.
And then another one that I was wondering about was the unemployment insurance,
Yes.
889.5%. I just
Yeah,
didn't understand that number.
Well, that's because, but due to COVID and the programs that we've, administered through the state for those that were unemployed during COVID times, our rates are being affected by that amount. Yeah. And I'll actually discuss how it's gone from 0.05 to 0.50 for this coming year. So.
That's it.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
At the page 2. The second row,
Excuse me, Mr. Chang, on the top, there's a page 4 of 80 or 4. Can you give me the number that's at the top right corner so I can make sure I follow you?
That's 11.9.
It's this one.
Yeah.
Page 4 of 80 or
Are you
page,
looking at page 4 of 80?
Yeah, the page 4 of 80.
Okay, all right, I'm with you.
So the second row, as of July 1st,
Yes,
Okay, so then it's an increase of 190%.
yes,
Can you?
yes.
Explanation?
So what this is telling us that in the 2021 school year, your starting beginning balance was 4.2 million. Okay, so now if you're wanting to compare that, this year, the starting beginning balance now for 21-22 is 12.2 million. So that's the reason that there's an increase.
Okay, so what attribute to the million?
Okay, well, when we looked at the analysis of comparing the estimated actuals to the actuals, there was a $6 million difference than what was presented to the board and in June. And that primarily is because we had lower expenses overall that due to carryover dollars that we were intending to spend for COVID that we didn't, and we're carrying it over. And we also had quite a reduction in special education costs that we had actually planned that didn't materialize. Those are the two major areas.
And then the page 6 of 80. Yeah.
Okay.
So you look at the number A04A. So there's a penalty and an interest on the delinquent tax. Can we know what?
What's the object code?
The penalty. And
Oh, 8048.
Yeah.
8048. Okay, that's a positive that those were delinquent taxes that we were assessed on your property owners here, and that came in. So that's a plus that we got that. It wasn't a negative on us.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. So thank you for asking that, Mr. Chang. So this has to do with the local property taxes from the property owners to us,
Correct.
as opposed to any delinquent taxes we had. To pay.
Exactly. We don't pay taxes.
Right?
Yeah.
That was the question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too.
Okay, and then the page 8.
Yes.
So A650 lease and rental. So I just like to know so you other territory you already changed the rate, right?
Well, I think the reason, and Dr. Delatorre can chime in, but I think what happened here is because of COVID and we were actually closed down, we couldn't lease our properties as we had done in the past. And we're hoping this year that we'll be able to recover some of that. So that's the difference.
So
That's correct.
No. This is, we're leasing to others to use our property.
Right.
And so this is the actual dollars that we received in
Right.
2021. And then if you compare the budget, we're being optimistic that maybe we'll be able.
I mean, so the 20 because of COVID-19, they did not lease, so they did not pay, right? So then the 2021, they start to honor for the agreement, so that's the start of the.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, okay, you're right.
How about do we change the rate?
We have increased the amount that some users are paying, but that has to do with many factors, not just necessarily increasing the base rate. It has to do with the number of facilities that they're using. In some cases, we have an increase in classrooms that are being used. And so the rate is going up there. And in other cases, field space has increased in terms of the number of fields that are going to be used and the amount of time they will be used. So we have not yet adjusted our use of facilities fee schedule, and we're working on that.
So something there's a room moving.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an opportunity for the district to bring that up to the benchmark rate.
Okay, next, page 13. in the middle of the classified salary. With the increase 204%. Does that mean the during the COVID-19?
No. So, so this is, first of all, this is the cafeteria fund. It's not the general fund, okay?
Right.
So, but what happened here in 2021, we were able to move those salaries from food services to COVID payments. So we actually were able to help this fund balance better because we were able to use those COVID dollars. So that, what you see there is the difference that we didn't cover with COVID. And that's why this year it's going to be higher in comparison.
But actually, no matter what, from the last year, COVID-19 year to current, I think that the FP, the number of FP is the same, right? We are paying the same.
The number of FTE this year is less than the number of FTE that we had in prior years, right, Judy? Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah, we have fewer employees this year than we had last year.
Yeah, the last question, page 17.
And this is still cafeteria fund?
I think that's it, yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. All right, sure, of course.
Potential that we have to pay back. Any focus on the-
Oh, no, I don't think we'll plan for that at
No.
all.
No potential for that.
We will spend every
Yes.
dollar.
Yeah,
That's first.
yes. You bet.
So on that last page of your PowerPoint,
Yes.
you made some assumptions. And from the data, we're assuming that the declining enrollment is going to continue. Are there
Yes.
some other assumptions that you can share with us? Because I still keep seeing from our projections, like 2022, 23, that there's this cliff coming up.
Yes, yes.
Not
yes.
only with STRS and PERS and all the benefits, what are some other assumptions that we should continue to look at? I mean, I see the COP, I see the stabilization, I see the care, like I see all of that, but are there some other ones we have to anticipate as we're moving forward?
Right. So the biggest one, of course, is our declining enrollment, but also that fiscal stabilization is also a set aside to deal with any other things that may come our way. We have assumed the STRS and PERS in those out years. And in the next presentation I'll give to you, we'll share that assumptions that we made. But this was just pretty much for this year, how we've just set aside, assigned it for this year, 2021. We'll talk about 21, 22 in a few minutes, so.
On that note, then I'm wondering, are there any maintenance or technology assumptions that are not here because we were already able to do it, but is there anything coming up that we need to be thinking about?
Right. That's a good discussion for us to have when we
The
talk
next one?
about for 21, 22, as we close out this year.
Okay.
But absolutely. And I think that this would be a great time for you to have this discussion. And we can always look to make our revisions to our budget if you feel that we'll get, board guidance on what you believe is the priority. So we're going to start out with some projections for you, but absolutely, we're wanting to get your input. So thank you.
Okay. Anyone with any other questions? All right, with that, I believe this is an action item.
Okay, with that, I would like to move to approve the 14A.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chang. Do I have a second on that?
A second?
Thank you, Ms. Chong. All right. Let's do roll call. Mrs. Strack,
Aye.
Mrs. Chong,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mr. Clacky? Mrs. Ryan, aye. Student Board Member?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. In accordance with Education Code 41010, the Board of Trustees has now approved and will file the 2020-21 unaudited actuals with the LA County Superintendent of Schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next, I believe you're up again.
Yep, I'm just going to stay up here for a
Yeah.
little while.
All right.
All right. So I thought we would give you, as we move forward now, we just closed that last year and now we're into this year. And we're going to have a series of budget updates. This is the first of many more to come. So we just wanted to kind of give a general overview, and I know that at a future time, we're going to have a more in-depth discussion, but this is sort of setting up that framework or the foundation for your next discussions. I just wanted to give a quick update from when the board was enacted, the state budget was enacted in July. Our economy continues to rebound, and the state enacted budget actually projected conservative revenues. And I think this is in, well, all of the consultants and the experts have said that this approach was to probably get ready for any kind of multi-year volatility, which is a good thing for us to also mirror because we just don't know. So again, as we closed out last year, that puts us in a good spot to be able to be in that position. And pretty much what was presented to you at the presentation for your adopted budget with the May revise is pretty much how the enacted budget went through. So with that, there weren't too many surprises. We, as you know, we got the mega COLA, and I want to talk a little bit about that and what that means to this district in a few minutes as we look at funding cliffs. Categorical programs, though, didn't get the mega COLA, nor did special ed, which is unfortunate. It would have been nice for all those programs to get the COLA, but only LCFF did. Good news was there were no deferrals. Again, the deferral program was we weren't getting our monthly paychecks from the state. They were deciding your June paycheck's going to come in November, and they did all of that to school districts, and that created a cash flow issue. However, this budget had no deferrals, and they paid off all of last year's. So all districts are now whole with any deferrals that were made. There was this rainy day fund account set up. And as you know, CalPERS and CalSTRS rates, they went up, but they were actually projected to go up even higher. So we're thankful that that didn't happen. And then, you know, we were talking about unemployment insurance, Ms. Chan, and here it is. It went from last year, 2021 to from 05 to this year, 0.50. That's the difference. Yeah. So as we talk about, I just want to highlight that the 5.07 mega COLA is going to give us 1.3 million more this year. Now, I want for us to kind of look at this as one-time money, because next year, when we get funded on our actual ADA, we're going to lose quite a bit of money to the reality. This is held, we're being held harmless. So we're being funded on the 2019-20 number. And that's what the increase of 1.3 million represents to us. So I will be showing you what happens in the years out where we're going to lose that ongoing source of money. It won't be an ongoing source of money for us. Health premiums continue to increase. UI unemployment insurance claims rate is higher, and we've seen the increase in CalPERS and STRS. And then although because we have lower positions and newer people that have come in to replace, our step and column increases have actually gone down. So that's helpful for us. I mentioned to you that We get funding based on the LCFF funding formula. TK through 3, it was mentioned earlier, there's an augment because of the class size reduction. But this is all around what you see the funding for each grade level. And so this is the rate with the mega COLA that's been added. And here are the assumptions that we have made for the years out as we look to start planning on what we want, how we want to work with our programs this year and the years out. So again, we saw the number 27. I think your number was 10 for current enrollment, right, Dr. Delatorre? I can't remember,
Yes.
or was it 11? We're saying 2717 because we are including non-public schools in our number because we do get funding for them, as well as county schools that are part of our enrollment. So our number is 2717 that we're looking at for funding purposes, not for staffing purposes. But you see that we're getting actually funded for the ADA of 2847 because we were held harmless based on the 1920 rate. So that's where you see the extra change in funding is 1.3. And then COVID dollars, we're going to actually realize those dollars this year. We're going to put that in the budget. We're going to recommend that you put those dollars in because we did not budget those. We wanted to make sure we budgeted the revenue and expenses to match. And so we're going to propose that. We assume $2 million from the schools foundation and the parcel tax at 5.6. Yes.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna ask, when you say COVID funds, that's the state and the federal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So for the school foundation money, before pass the parcel tax, the time they also raise the money. So is that
Yes.
that's still come on the past 2 million or maybe?
That, I don't know, Dan, you might be able to answer that.
I can speak to that. We don't have that money. The schools foundation raised money that they were going to give to us if the parcel tax did not pass on June 29th. It did pass, so we never got that money from the schools foundation. They have the money, yes.
But we are still assuming we're going to get
Correct.
2 million.
2 million. Yes.
That's our assumption.
That is our
made.
assumption.
Okay. So I want for us to look at the next year. So we're projecting we're going to be getting 2652, and we're going to be funded on 2642. And the way we came up with that number is that you get the higher of last year or this year, right? So we're taking this year's number of 2717. We took 97% of that number and we came up with this 2642, okay? Because there's going to be less students next year, so we're going to take the higher number. And you can see already what happens when we do that. Because of the 200s plus students, we're already going to lose 1.4 million in LCFF funding. Yes.
Oh, sorry, you go.
I was just gonna have that 97%. Is that based on the California losing 3%?
No, that's based on of the enrollment. We assume that 97% of the students will be attending every day. It's we need to see the whites of their eyes in order for us to count them. I say other ways of talking about students, but they need to actually be in their seats in order for us to count them. So we have figured 97% of our total enrollment, kids are actually sitting in their seats, and that's how we get funded.
So, we're talking about the change in LCFF funding, right?
Yes.
So we expect, right, for the coming year that we will, a 1.3 million, right?
For next, yes, they're this year, yes.
Sorry, for this year. And then next year, we're talking about a negative, right?
Right.
We're talking about a negative, and then we're gonna flatten out to an equal sum, right? I mean, a sum 0, 20.
Well, that's going to continue. So actually, there's not going to be a change, but we're going to continue with the 1.4 million less.
In the negative, right? So that
Right.
shouldn't be a 0, that should be,
Well, I guess if I should put the actual number, but I put change in LCFF funding. So it won't change from 22, 23. It'll continue to be 1.4 million.
okay. I think
Yeah,
I,
sorry, that's my fault.
Oh,
I
no,
should-
and
I
I,
should be
well,
more-
no, and I think it's my fault, like I need to see it, in
Yeah.
person. So if we did do that, right, and just doing rudimentary math, right?
Yes,
So for 2021, 22, it looks like we'll get about 14.7 million, right? I mean, just if we just add the LCFF funding, the COVID funds, the federal revenue, school foundation partial tax, right?
okay.
But then in 2022, 23, based on that scenario, right, we will drop like $7 million.
I don't think that it's that much. We
Because if
will,
you say it's a negative, right, the change, right, that we don't get that, and then COVID funds are 0, I just added it up.
oh, yeah.
So
Uh-uh.
it's almost a loss of half our funding.
Well, the COVID funds though are one time. So it's, for us, we actually have to set that aside because
Yeah.
everything that comes in, we're going to spend it.
Sure.
So, I
right.
mean, it's not like we're adding that in and putting ongoing programs that we'll have to continue to fund.
But even under that scenario, right?
Okay.
It's, so say we take out the one-time COVID fund money, right,
Okay.
of 4.7, right?
Yes.
So then that says we'd have like $10 million, right? I mean, I'm just taking it out, I'm making assumptions, right, based on I'm just trying to figure out how much money we're gonna get this year versus how much money we're really gonna have the year after versus how much money we're really gonna have afterwards, because based on this scenario, it's, I still can't figure out exactly right how much we have or don't have. So I'm trying to figure out, Pearl, whether we don't or do have COVID fund money, it's gonna be 14 million or 10 million, and then 2022 to 2023, it's gonna be like 7.5 million, and then I just added it up. I'm just asking, right, from a forecasting point of view, is that correct?
So the revenue for 22, 23 with the negative, actually, do you have that? Benji, what is that number for the revenue portion for 22, 20? Total? 39.8.
No, based on this scenario.
But this is just showing key revenue assumptions. It's not showing the
This is not the
LCFF
total
revenue. It's not
No,
the
I
total
understand
revenue.
that, but even based on these assumptions, it looks like there's gonna be a large reduction. We
There
can Come
is.
back to it.
Yeah, there is going to be a reduction. There is going to be deficit spending.
And that's what I'm trying to get to,
Yeah,
right?
we
When
are.
can we start doing deficit spending? I
Yeah,
guess.
we're going to start next year, right?
And I think you have a slide for that, right?
I don't,
Oh, you gave me a
yeah.
handout with that, with the multi-year projections. Okay.
No,
On her.
Yeah, you go ahead. Yeah.
Is it fair to say that COVID funds of 4.78 million it's an increase in income, but it's also corresponded with a one-time increase in expense.
exactly,
So long-term, we can back that.
Exactly.
We can zero it out.
zero it out.
As far as deficit spending, that number should not even be.
Right, we
Right,
don't, yeah,
correct.
we don't even consider that,
So
correct.
the deficit, so there's a cliff, but it's not as
Mm-hmm.
catastrophic as cliff.
Because we're not gonna include the COVID funding.
and we also don't
Right.
have the COVID expenditures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an in and an out.
We treat it as in and out.
I have a question regarding another revenue assumption. Do we have a significant number in other donations? Like I know PTA donates, and that's an assumption that they're raising a certain amount. And I don't know if that is necessarily a key revenue assumption, but is that something that we need to be thinking about?
It is, but we would have a corresponding reduction in what they're paying for, correct? If they're not able to meet that.
So it becomes another like cancels it
Yes.
out.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are assumptions where it's like, they're not going to cancel out
Correct.
Right,
Yes.
that's right.
Okay.
And so if we get less than that, then we're gonna
Mhm.
have to make reductions somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or we'll have a larger deficit.
Right.
So let me go on to the next slide, just to kind of give you an idea how we're forecasting expenses. So in the third column over is what we're proposing. And at a later time, we'll have further discussion on this, but this is what we're going to propose. We bring as a budget revision to you at a later time. But we have now put in the COVID expenses, we put in the COVID revenue, all the carryover that you saw in the restricted, we're now going to budget it for the 2022 year. And when we do that, this is what you see. And then,
Can I ask real quickly,
of course,
the COVID expenditures,
uh-huh.
are they, where would they be reflected on this?
They're spread between books and supplies, operating, and I think certificated salaries
And classified.
and classified salaries too, right? Yeah,
Sprinkled.
just spread throughout. So all the COVID dollars that we can spend in these different program areas, we've now put them into this proposed revision.
So those expenditures are on the 21-22
Correct.
year, but not on the 22-23
Right.
year.
Right. And that's the reason is because they dropped down to the bottom line as carryover. So now we're going to put them into the budget for this coming year. Yes.
For the 21 to 22, what is the equipment, the cost of the 2.9 million?
That's the basic large item is switches, I
Yeah,
believe.
it's-
That's going to be used for.
It's an
COVID dollars.
upgrading our technology infrastructure.
Uh,
We had talked with the board about that, and that is going to cost $1.1 million. And when is that actually happening?
That is happening as early as Thanksgiving week
Okay,
or as late as the
So-
New Year.
yeah, so that you see that money included in the equipment expenditure for 21-22.
Yes.
We have the money. We have not yet paid for that, and it has not yet been installed, but it's coming.
That's why you see the following year,
Mhm.
look how it drops
Yeah.
because
So if there is any budget improve or IT during the COVID-19 year, I don't know.
That
In education, I think in
Yeah.
healthcare.
So ESSER three monies were to be spent on technology infrastructure upgrades and or HVAC upgrades, along with a few other things, but those were the two major areas that were identified for ESSER three monies.
So that is a COVID expense.
It is, yes, it is a very
We
legit,
would Otherwise have incurred. because
correct,
we need to be upgraded.
correct.
But we're able to.
Yes, that's correct. We are also going to be upgrading HVAC systems at the schools. We're still costing that out, right, Angie, or did Gil finally get that to us? Still costing it out, but it's going to be very pricey as well, and it will come from COVID money, and that is a valid expense.
Is that included in here?
I don't know whether we've included.
Yes.
We did. Okay.
So that's probably part of that big giant equipment
Mhm.
number.
Yes.
And I know that this is an overview, right? This is an overview summary today, but the board will receive, right, a more detailed accounting of what the
Absolutely.
COVID monies are. where
Oh,
they're
yes.
gonna go for,
Absolutely.
Right,
Yes.
maybe not today, but it's coming, right?
That's our next meeting, where we take a deeper dive into the budget, and Director Lindblad is putting that together for us now. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, as we move on, this, again, these were just the assumptions that we made for CalPERS and CalSTRS for this year and these, yeah, this was the dashboard that we used from School Services of California. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the other monies going out from basically two ways. One is from the unrestricted to the restricted, but two other funds as well. So we had budgeted that we were going to have to transfer monies to food services because they were running in the red. And we were able to move their salaries, as I mentioned, to COVID dollars. So the general fund did not have to contribute any monies to food services last year. And again, the contribution to special ed, it was, I think it was an aberration. If it stays at this rate, that'd be great. But last year, I think because of COVID and the services and the changes that we saw with everything, special ed contribution actually went down, but we're going to keep on track as to assume that we're going to be back to where we were. And so this money is actually helping to supplement the program and make it whole. And we need to continue to contribute to our deferred maintenance program. And so that's what that other outgo is. So when we look at these projections and we start with our beginning balance, put in the revenue and expenses, these are how we plan to end, what the ending balances for every year is, and how we have projected or proposed for 21-22 how we want to allocate or assign those balances. And this is where we would like very much to have the board input. This is just a proposal at this point, and it would be a good thing for us when we have that deeper discussion about the budget, that we can go into each one of these areas in further detail. For example, for the future cash flow situation, maybe Dr. Del Toro, you can talk about the interest of setting aside monies with the parcel tax.
Yes. One of the things that we had discussed previously is presenting the Board of Education with a long-term plan to increase our reserves in an amount equal to Measure E, Measure R, and the Schools Foundation annual campaign contribution of $2 million. And the reason for that would be to have a plan B for at least 1 year, a cushion to get us to a point where we can react or respond if Measure R should fail, if Measure E should fail again. We would have at least 1 year of reserve to get us through to the point where we can pivot.
I think that would be something during your budget study session to see whether that still is an area that we want to explore. But for now, we're proposing that and subject to board discussion. I'll go back to future stabilization in just a moment. The other thought was that we currently are making payments on our Barth auditorium. We currently have an outstanding loan of over $6 million. That loan is set out to be for 42 years. And when we're done, we'll have paid, if we continue at the rate we are at, we're going to end up paying a lot more in interest than the actual loan amount.
Yeah.
So it's to our advantage to try to pay that off. I think there was some discussion of a future bond potentially, but you know, until the bond passes, we might want to be fiscally prudent and set that aside and maybe start paying down that. So this is the suggestion. At least this amount is 3 years of payment. It's about $500,000 a year. So that would be 1.5 million. We talked about the declining enrollment, just having some reserve to deal with that. My suggestion is that you would use this to have a soft landing when you start making reductions, because you will need to do that. You want to right size based on your actual enrollment, but this way you don't have to do the deep cuts in all one time, that you can spread it because you've got a reserve there to kind of soften that blow. So that's what that 2.5 million is. And you can see that in 22-23, we already took out the dollars from that reserve to deal with 22, 23, and by 23, 24, it's gone. So we might want to think about more, and that's what that future stabilization dollars are also there for as well. So I think those would be great discussion points for our future board meeting as we talk about how we want to think about planning for this year's reserves as well as for the future as well. And this is just a little budget history. I won't go through this, but the main bullet point down there was Measure E passed, and we were able to bring back all those positions that were laid off.
So could I just ask, and I know this sounds nitpicky, but
No.
it's important to me.
Sure.
It says Measure E passed on June 29th, and all the positions that were laid off were rehired, which is not accurate. Because we laid, right, 41.2 certificated right, FTE were laid off and 33 were brought back. So I'd like the language to reflect.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it should say, the positions were restored, but the people weren't necessarily brought back. Some of them took jobs elsewhere.
No, that wasn't the reason. That's because we had right-sized the district.
Oh, right. But yeah, okay. So the positions though that we were asking to be supported by Measure E were restored.
We can put the exact number that,
Right, that would be
Yeah.
best if it's. all right.
Okay, we'll
Yeah.
work on it.
my apologies.
No, I'm
I
sorry. that's-
understood,
yeah.
I understood.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. So our next steps, so we'll continue to assess our enrollment and staffing. December 15th, we're going to bring forward your first interim. Remember the budget cycle? And then you'll have the auditor come in January, and then we'll do the second interim in March. But in the meantime, in January, the governor is going to come out with his budget as we start planning for next year. So, and so we'll start planning for 22, 23, and we'll continue to keep you updated. And I look forward to our discussions for our next budget presentation. Thank you.
I had a question regarding the line item.
Sure.
Restricted program under ending balance projections. It said restricted programs in 2020-21 school year, 3,353,000, and then the following years it drops down to 871. What, I'm sure this is all stuff we talked about, but is that COVID?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's what
Yeah,
we're talking about.
that's what that is.
This is all stuff we're talking about at our big deep dive in a couple of
Yes.
days.
Yes.
All right. This is also an action item. If there are no other questions, may I have a motion for,
Actually, I think it's informational.
This is not the action. item.
oh, it's just an information item? This is not an action item? Okay, so now we're going to 14B. All right, Pearl, you're up again. This is
Yes.
resolution number 5, 2020 to 21 appropriations limit.
Yes, so related to Proposition 4, which was enacted in 1979, the legislation placed a limit on government spending, which also included school districts. And the spending had to be no more than the growth of the population and inflation. By adopting resolution number 5, the district has determined that for 2021, we have spent within our appropriation limit. And the second part of the resolution is giving the estimate as to what our 21-22 appropriation limit is to be. And for further information on the details, it's in your unaudited actuals book on page 63 that gives you the exact calculations. So we are asking for board approval for resolution number 5, please.
I make a motion to approve resolution number 5, item 14B on the agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Shack and Mr. Chang. And I'd like to do a roll call vote. Mrs. Shack,
Aye.
Mrs. Shaw,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mr. Kalaki, Mrs. Ryan, I, student board member.
Aye.
All right, motion passes for the action item resolution number 5. All right, 14C resolution number 6, certification education protection account, unaudited actual revenue and expenditures. This is also an action item.
Yes, so I'm going to talk about resolution number 6 and 7, because they're similar. One is for this, for the year that just closed, and the other resolution is for the year coming up. So the two resolutions are regarding the Education Protection Act, known as EPA. It's not the Environmental Protection Agency, but it's the Education Protection Act. The APA, which was established by the voters in 2012, requires that the district discloses how they spend those dollars. And there needs to be an accounting of that at a public meeting. During that time, there was an increase for taxes that are specifically to be used for schools. But part of the requirement is that we needed to disclose exactly how those dollars were spent. So resolution number 6 says that based on the unaudited actuals, that we have disclosed how we spent those dollars. And then in resolution number 7, we have an actual budget there that shows how we will spend the monies for this coming year. We're asking for board approval for both. We'll take one at a time, but approval for a resolution number 6 and resolution number 7.
Move to approve the 2021-22 resolution number 6, certification of EPA unaudited actuals, revenues and expenditures.
A second.
That's resolution number 6 that we're getting the
Yes, 6.
motion. All right, so thank you, Mrs. Chong. Thank you, Mr. Kalaki. With that, roll call, Mrs. Jack,
Aye.
Mrs. Chong,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mr. Kalaki,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, I, student board member. Thank you for hanging out with us.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Next, I would like action item, a motion for 14D, resolution number 7.
I move to approve resolution number 7.
I second.
Thank you, Mrs. Chong, Mrs. Jack. And with that, roll call vote, Mrs. Jack,
Aye.
Mrs. Chong,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mr. Kalaki,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, I, a student board member.
Aye.
All right, motion passes on action item, resolution number 7. Resolution number 8, sufficiency of textbook. No? And instructional material, Dr. Lena Rector.
Thank you.
This is
President.
an action item.
Thank you. So this is a reoccurring item that we bring to the board every year with a recommendation for adoption. It's resolution number 8, sufficiency of textbooks and instructional materials. So tonight, the staff again is bringing the recommendation to the board to adopt resolution 8, approving that each pupil in the district has sufficient textbooks and or instructional materials in each course subject that are consistent with the California curriculum framework and standards adopted by the California State Board of Education. We have provided the board with copies of the principal certification statements that were that demonstrated compliance with resolution number 8, sufficiency of textbooks. So tonight we are asking the board to adopt resolution number 8.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clarkey. Thank you, Mr. Chang. Roll call, Mrs. Jack,
Aye.
Mrs. Chong,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mr. Clarkey,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, I, student board member.
Aye.
All right, we're bringing it home. Board superintendent discussion item. Are there any at this time?
None for me.
All right, thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to adjourn our meeting and then we are returning to close.